Hey everybody, happy month of May! I can't believe it's already May. Being gone 2 weeks last month made everything like crazy, and it feels like it's already going to be summer and I'm not even prepared. But I want to thank each and every one of you for your support. It's because of you that I'm able to continue doing what I do, and I honestly couldn't do it without you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you. But this month I got so many questions, so let's just jump into them. I'm going to break them up to 3 questions per video. So you will be getting a total of 6. So hang on and let's just jump into them. Here we go. The first question says, hey Katie, we've spoken in more detail about what's gone on, but how do you deal with a new trauma when you already have PTSD? Recently, I've been through a repeat of what causes the PTSD, so something similar happened again by the same person and in a similar way. I'm just totally numb to everything. I'm tired, which seems to be the only way I can express how I feel, and I don't seem to be feeling the way that I should be? Question mark? Does repeated trauma just become normal so you don't react as much? I hope this makes sense. This totally makes sense. And I would encourage any of you, if you've been traumatized more than once, check out my video about CPTSD or complex PTSD. It's when we have repeated traumas. A lot of us who will grow up in households where there's a lot of physical or emotional abuse, we will exhibit some of the symptoms of PTSD, but the C portion of it makes it a little different, where we almost numb out. Dissociative like states like DID or just dissociation as a whole are very, very common when we have a lot of repeated traumas. And it's very normal for us to completely zone out, to not even know how we feel, to almost like check out, like what dissociation is. And it's okay to take your time also processing all that's happening. So if any of you are dealing with this, what I would encourage you to do is to get some professional resources, whether that's reaching out to a therapist. If you're already seeing a therapist, maybe increase your sessions for a while. See if you can maybe start EMDR or any other type of trauma therapy. And I also have all of those videos I did with Alexa, who's a trauma specialist. I would watch those again because we need to, the next stage, so this has happened again, we're feeling re-traumatized, we're numbing out. The next stage is figuring out what our resiliency zone is. Do you remember Alexa talking about that? How that's the zone where we can start processing through what's going on and start healing the trauma and the hurt and the pain that's happened. And we kind of need to grow that zone so that our daily life we can participate more without feeling like we have to just numb out and dissociate. And so there's things that we can do to help build that, and we talk about it in the videos together. So check those out and also try some new grounding techniques and know that it can take a while, and that's completely okay. And on to the second question. It says, hey Katie, can you please talk a bit on counter-transference? I saw a patient the other day, and while talking to her, I felt like crying. I think I know the content that triggered the emotional response, but what's your advice on dealing with this, and how can it be minimized in the future, especially since this content may be a recurring theme? And there's a second portion of the question, but let's answer that part first. So for any of you who don't know, counter-transference is when we as therapists respond to what's happening in your life or situation or whatever we're talking about, and we have a response as well. Because transference is when we're taking, like, transference itself would be me treating my male therapist like he's my dad and feeling like he's my dad. But then counter-transference is when the therapist responds back out of their own feelings of the situation. And does that make sense? So it's like I'm transferring it onto them and they're almost like accepting it and reacting out of their own emotional response, their own situations in their life. And as therapists, we try to minimize counter-transference as much as possible, but sometimes it's inevitable. And there can be certain things that you don't specialize or don't treat as a way to protect yourself from this as a therapist. So that's like my first word of advice, is that if there's a certain type of issue or situation that is easily avoidable, like for instance, let's say that you struggled with an alcoholic parent, or you yourself were an alcoholic, and so you don't really feel comfortable treating addiction because it's very triggering to you and you could lash out back at your client, then you just wouldn't treat addiction. And that would be a way for you to kind of protect yourself until maybe later, if you so desire, if you feel like your work in therapy yourself is gone far enough that you feel safe and okay enough to start treating it. But you may just not want to because you don't have to specialize in everything. You don't have to see everybody. So that's kind of like my first portion. And so the second word of advice that I have would then be to work in your own therapy on whatever it is that got triggered. That's the only way that we can stop counter-transference from happening, is to actually work on ourselves. And it's actually fair, if this happened in the session, your client's gonna notice, it's okay to come back the next time and say, I want to let you know that was kind of my response, and I'm sorry. And I've been working on it in my own therapy. You don't have to share very much about it, but you can just say, I know last session was hard. Let's go back and talk about that again. So that you're prompting them to maybe have a better reaction from you and a better therapeutic response in session by doing it over, like getting a do-over. And it's okay, no therapist is perfect. And like I said, you don't have to share why it was hard, but you can offer it up that you want to do it again. But please work through it in your own therapy to minimize, its happenings in the future. And then the second part of her question says, the same patient yelled at me and I felt extremely disrespected and invalidated. It made me feel terrible and I just cried subsequently for 2 days. Is there any way that I can stop people from getting to me like this? This is gonna sound terrible or maybe too harsh or whatever, but this is the honest to God truth. As a therapist, counselor, social worker, anybody in the mental health field, if someone yells at you and you feel unsafe, if it makes you cry, if you feel overwhelmed, you do not have to see that person anymore. Now, I know that may not be therapeutically appropriate in all situations, but if someone's yelling at you and it makes you have an extreme emotional response, you don't feel like seeing them anymore, it's kind of changed the therapeutic relationship, you have every right to tell them, because you yelled at me last week, I no longer feel safe, it's hard for me to come in here and see you. I understand things are hard, but at this point I'm not able to see you anymore. And I know that's terrible, but that's a right that we have, because there's no reason for us as therapists or counselors or any mental health professional to feel unsafe in the workplace. With that being said, my guess with this situation is that it would have something to do with the counter-transference and the response that you were giving and the way that dynamic of the relationship had all of a sudden shifted into something maybe that was a little unhealthy. And so the other option, if you don't feel unsafe and you feel like you can keep seeing them, would be to address that. Direct, upfront, hold your boundaries, be clear about what's okay and what's not okay, and hope that you can move forward. Okay? I know that sucks, I know it's hard, but I hope that makes sense and is helpful. On to question number 3. And that is, I've been wondering about alcoholism and what determines it. Are there varying degrees? Also, is it possible for an alcoholic to sometimes drink? How can we support someone who is struggling with it? Now, I do have an older video about alcoholism and how we diagnose it. And I will link it in the description. You can click that and check it out if you want to know how it's diagnosed and kind of the varying degrees of how it gets worse and the different levels of alcoholism as a whole. Because things have changed since the DSM-5 came out. So I'm just throwing that out there. Click that link and check it out. But onto their question about, is it possible for an alcoholic to sometimes drink? And how do we determine if someone is an alcoholic? To give you a short synopsis, if we have to drink more to get drunk, if we have withdrawal when we stop, or we've tried to stop ourselves from drinking and we can't, those are all symptoms of alcoholism. And someone who struggles with alcoholism cannot drink, because to be an alcoholic, one drink's not enough. It's all or nothing. They get blackout drunk or they don't drink at all. And so it's very dangerous for them to even tiptoe into that realm again, trying to have a beer here and there, because often they aren't able to control the compulsion almost to drink more, or the urge. It's almost like when we struggle with self-harm urges or eating disorder urges, it's if we tease that voice or feed into it a little bit, it comes back with a force. And so for them to go and try to drink socially again can actually bring their alcoholism back full force, and it could cause a full-blown relapse. And the last portion of this question, how can we support someone who's struggling with it? The best thing is to check in with them and to support any of their choices to recover. If they're trying to do something that's bettering them, like going to AA meetings or going to treatment or just talking about it and saying, oh, I'm not gonna drink, maybe not drinking around them to make it a little easier, giving them an outlet to talk about what they're feeling and what's going on and letting them know it's okay, and just being there. I think that's usually the best way that we can support those that we love who are struggling with any kind of mental health issue. I hope you found those answers helpful. Know that there are so many other videos, so don't miss them, because I'm filming them right after this, and your question might be in those. Thank you again for all your support, and I will see you next month. Bye!